Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Founders Grid, sponsored by Gaper.io. Today, we have John Espey. John is the founder and CEO of Defiance Ventures. John, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Mustafa.
So, give us a brief background about yourself before founding Defiance Ventures. What you've been up to.
Sure. I've been a software developer for most of my career. I started out hands-on keyboard writing Java code for a bunch of the .com companies. I came out of undergrad in 2000. A couple years in, I ended up joining a startup company called Amentra. They had about 8 or 9 employees doing software development for clients. And I started off just working on a couple clients for them, ended up opening an office in Charlotte, North Carolina, which is where I live today. We grew that company from 8 when I joined to about 135 in 2008, and we sold it to Red Hat. I spent 2 years running Red Hat's middleware consultancy, which was our old team. And then I went off and helped start a smart grid company called NextGrid, where I spent a couple years just getting it off the ground, raising money, building out a supply chain, building out a sales process, building out a sales team, and some of the technology on the software side. After I stepped away from the day-to-day at NextGrid, I started doing independent consulting and ended up building a credit card marketing platform that we called Reward Summit. We got it featured on the App Store as the #1 finance category app. Learned a lot about mobile wallets and payments and that whole ecosystem, but never really figured out how to make money with that product. So we ended up starting another consulting company to kind of take the lessons we learned in building Reward Summit and what I had learned in being involved in building NextGrid, and really figure out how to help big companies innovate using some of the newer tools that had been built over the prior 10 years. We grew that to a couple hundred people, and I stepped away from the day-to-day in 2018, went back to doing some independent consulting and advisory work, and ultimately teamed up with a longtime friend of mine to start Defiance Ventures.
Interesting. And how's the journey been so far at Defiance? So if you can build up more.
Certainly interesting. Yeah. So our first day of existence was March 1st. So right around the time that COVID was unfolding, and I don't think anybody really knew what it meant. I still don't think a lot of people know exactly what it means. But it was definitely an interesting time to start a company for sure. But obviously, if you can start remote, I think it's much easier to be a remote company than to try and do it the other direction, where you have all this muscle memory of offices and meetings and it being face to face. It's been very easy for us from the perspective of we're just used to doing everything remotely at this point.
Got it. Interesting. So, unfortunate times because of COVID, and it has hit a lot of businesses while it has acted as a catalyst for others, right? So how's the journey being for Defiance, especially starting on the 1st of March? That's like 15 days before the lockdown. So what's it been like, building a team during COVID? That is something.
It's been interesting for sure. I think so. At the core of Defiance, what we do is we acquire and start and launch technology businesses, enterprise B2B SaaS businesses. But we also have a core group of companies in our portfolio that are service providers that can service the portfolio businesses, but also third-party clients. And I think that this includes an ad agency. This includes a consultancy. We had a lot of projects teed up ahead of time that were put on hold. I still think they're going to be done, but our clients are saying, no, we need to wait because we don't know how long this is going to last. We've got clients who have revenue shares with municipalities, and people aren't coming into cities and using the services, so they're not going to be in an expansive mode. On the flip side, on our agency business, we have a couple of ABC stores that in South Carolina that are clients, and their business has exploded because if you're selling alcohol to consumers, that was deemed an essential business. And if people aren't going to bars to drink, they're probably going to be drinking at home. And so that part of the business grew. But I think overall, it was definitely negative for the service businesses, just a lot of uncertainty.
True. So coming down to mental health of the teams, so keeping the team intact, bringing customers online, closings, creativity, marketing. Let's start with the dev team. How you've been coping with them. Then let's start with the sales. How are you coping with that during COVID?
Sure. So the dev team, I mean, I think if you look back, if I look back on my career in the Amentra days, which again was the first consulting company that we grew and ultimately sold to Red Hat, we would set expectations with employees that you're going to be on the client site 90% of the time. And it might not be quite that much, but generally speaking, it was expected that you were going to travel and the client was going to pay for it. That was from 2003 to 2008 or 2010. If you fast forward to level, but just by 2015, we were telling consultants you might travel up to 20% of the time. And I think it's because the tools and the way that we build software have evolved. We've moved to public cloud, we've moved to Slack for messaging, we've moved to Zoom, GitHub, and a lot of these tools are really designed to be cloud native tools, which means they don't need to be done in place and in person. So from that perspective, the developers, I think, had the easiest adjustment, because I think a lot of our developers prefer to do things by Slack than even getting on the phone and talking at sometimes. For other members of the team, we have a portfolio company that really hasn't modernized their technology stack in quite a while. We acquired them back in March. And we were telling them even as long ago as November, when we were starting the process of acquiring them, we told them, we need you to be able to work 100% remotely. We weren't thinking about COVID. We were just thinking that it's a more effective way for developers to work. And they told us, no, it can't be done. All of our processes have been built from the ground up with us to be here. And then it was quite a catalyst seeing COVID and the lockdown. We quickly figured out how to turn that into a remote business. But all of our other employees, I think, feel much more natural in a remote environment.
Got it. Interesting. Interesting. So, any three pieces of advice you would give to especially young entrepreneurs, that are just starting out, and this COVID has been hitting everyone with so much turbulence, that you lose focus. So any young entrepreneurs who are just starting out, it's their first venture, just out of college, what advice would you give them from building teams, scaling teams, technology? What three areas to focus on?
Absolutely. I think the first thing I would tell them is this is the absolute best time to do this. It seems counterintuitive, but the best businesses come out of the biggest crises. And I've never seen one, at least from an economic perspective, on the scale of what we're seeing. And so I would tell people counterintuitively, if you're thinking about starting something, you want to do it during a recession. The next thing I would tell them is think about where the opportunities are, because you've got always, as an entrepreneur, you're always looking for something that you can go do that the incumbents aren't willing to do or are unable to do. And I would challenge people that there are a lot of very big companies that are going to find it difficult to operate in this environment. And that's just another advantage, because you don't have the baggage that those companies might have. And then the other thing I would tell them this during any time, but especially right now, get revenue, control costs, be very cautious with the business, because who knows how long it's going to be before deals get funded. I know that deals are being funded, but I don't think this is the time that you want to be raising funds. I think if you could get to a less uncertain time and you can figure out a way to get there without giving up the farm, you'll probably be able to keep more control of your business.
Got it. So, John, last question. Where do you see Defiance 3 years from now?
That's an interesting one. I think that hopefully where we will be by then, it's been funded by myself and my partner, solely the two of us. We said that we wanted to prove it out and prove out the concept of being able to come in and run these companies better than they were being run before. I think that within 3 years, we'll have had plenty of time to do that. We'll hopefully have grown the portfolio to double or triple the size of what it is. And hopefully we're going to be looking at raising a more proper fund so that we could go after some bigger acquisitions. I'd say that what we're doing today is a little bit more what you'd call opportunistic, when we see opportunities to where we have skills and can grow, and there's a founder who sees that, hey, if these guys take over and kind of run some of the things that I'm not as capable of doing, I can have even though I'll have a smaller chunk of ownership in it, it'll be more lucrative for me. I think that that's what we're trying to prove out right now.
Got it. Got it. John, thank you so much for being on the show. We would have loved to continue, and I'm pretty sure we could have talked for another half an hour, but my marketing team tells me I need to keep it within 12 minutes. Otherwise, it just got sad. But thank you so much for being on the show. Take care of yourself and stay safe.
Thanks so much, Mustafa. Take care. Cheers.